Hello, you guys. It's Charlie, aka Miss Charlie's A. Welcome to Charlie's Universe 2014. And for those of you who may see this video, WWE Survivor Series is November 23rd, and the pre-show and the actual show is going to be here live at my place on the WWE Network. So it's going to be a Thanksgiving potluck. So if you're coming, make sure you bring yourself or bring everyone some type of a side dish for Thanksgiving theme. It's going to be quite fun. It's snowing tonight, you guys. Just a little bit. But it was enough to blanket the streets and make it icy and slippery. And it's going to be cold, apparently, the rest of this week. So it's going to be quite interesting. Anyway, you guys, I am continuing on with the Sex and the City book reading series. And yesterday I read chapter 1 and 2. And today I'm going to read chapter 3 and 4. So if you care to stay tuned, you are more than welcome. Alright, so this is chapter 3 called We Loved a Serial Dater. On a recent afternoon, 7 women gathered in Manhattan over wine, cheese, and cigarettes to animatedly discuss the one thing that had in common: a man, specifically an eligible man of Manhattan, a man we'll call Tom Paris. Tom Paris is 43 years old, 5 feet, 10 inches tall, with straight brown hair. There was nothing remarkable about his appearance, save for a penchant a few years ago for dressing in black Armani suits paired with wacky suspenders. He comes from a wealthy manufacturing family and grew up on Fifth Avenue and in Bedford, New York. He lives in a modern high-rise on Fifth Avenue. Over the last 15 years, Paris, who is also always referred to by his last name only, had become something of a legend in New York. He's not exactly a womanizer, because he's always trying to get married. Paris is, rather, one of the city's most accomplished serial daters, engaging in up to 12 relationships a year. But after 2 days or 2 months, the inevitable happens. Something goes wrong, and he says, "I get dumped." For a certain type of woman, 30-ish, ambitious, well-placed socially, dating Paris or avoiding his attentions has become nothing less than a rite of passage. Sort of like your first limo ride and your first robbery, combined. Even among the city's other notorious ladies, men, Paris stands out. For one thing, he appears to be holding far fewer cards. He has neither the well-bred good looks of Count Erich Weitzmeister nor the free-flowing cash of Mort Zuckerman. I wanted to know, what's Paris got? Each of the women I contacted had been involved with Paris, either intimately or as an object of his Ardolph affections, and each said she had dumped him. None refused my request to get together for a session of talking about Paris. Each woman, perhaps, had something unresolved about Paris. Maybe they wanted him back. Maybe they wanted him dead. We met at the home of Sarah, a filmmaker who used to be a model. Until I got sick of the bullshit and gained 20 pounds, she wore a dark pinstripe suit. "When you look over the list of guys you've dated, Paris is the one guy that doesn't make any sense," she said. "You think, what was that about?" But before we could even get to the juicy bits, we made a disturbing discovery. Although none of the women had heard from Paris for months, that morning he had called 4 of them. "I don't think he knows anything. I think it was just coincidence," said Magna. Magda had been friends with Paris for years. In fact, most of her girlfriends are former dates of Paris, whom she met through him. "He knows everything about us," one woman said. "He likes Daryl Van Horn and the Witches of Eastwick." "Van Horny is more like it," said another. We opened the wine. "The thing with Paris is," said Sarah, "the reason he's so charming is, when you first meet him, he is articulate, he is funny, and he's available at all times because he doesn't work. What's more fun than a guy who says, 'Meet me for lunch,' then you go back to work. Then he says, 'Meet me for cocktails at 6. When was the last time you went out with a guy who actually wanted to see you 3 times a day?" "Cocktails is such a loaded word," said Magna. "It's like Katharine Hepburn and Cary Grant." Jackie, a magazine editor, said, "When I met him, we started seeing each other instantly. 5 nights a week. He won't leave you alone. He's smart because the thing that he does is he loves the phone," said Sarah. "Which, to a woman, you think he must really be into me because he calls you 10 times a day, and then you start to disregard the fact that he's like a funny-looking little thing. Then you start to look at his suspenders, and you think, 'My God,'" said Merv, a poet who is half Irish. "Then you begin to realize he's not funny," said Sarah. "He has a good stack of jokes, but once you've heard them a million times, they get really annoying. It's like a loop. He's looping himself. He told me that I was the only girl he had ever went out with who got his jokes," said Merv, "and I didn't think they were funny. And then you see his apartment. Those 25 doormen, what's that about? You wonder why he doesn't just throw out all of his furniture and go to the door store instead. Once he showed me these napkin holders he had gotten. They were in the shape of handcuffs, like this was how he was going to seduce a girl, with napkin holders. The first date, 44. So how does it all start? Jackie's story was typical. "I was waiting for a table at Blue Ribbon," she said. "He walked up to me and started talking. He was instantly funny, I thought. Oh my God, we're really clicking, but I'll probably never hear from him again." Everyone nodded. After all, hadn't we all been there? "He called at something like 8 the next morning," Jackie said. "Want to go to lunch?" he asked. "He asked you to lunch at 44 the next day." Sapphire, a blonde divorced mom, laughed. "He didn't take me to 44 until the second day." "While you think he's still funny and clever, he asked you to go away with him for the weekend," said Jackie. "He asked me to marry him on something like the 10th day," said Sarah. "That was pretty quick, even for him." "He took me to dinner at his parents' house on like 3rd date," said Britta, a tall, rangy brunette who works on a photo rep and is now happily married. "It was just me and his parents and the butler. The next day I remember I was sitting on his bed and he was showing me home videos of him as a kid. He was begging me to marry him. He was saying, 'See, I could be a serious guy.' And then he ordered some cheesy Chinese food. I thought, 'Marry you? What, are you smoking something?'" Ragona laughed. "On the other hand, I had just broken up with someone and I was pretty upset. He was always there." A pattern emerged. The women who had dated Paris had all just left their husbands or long-term boyfriends when Paris found them. Or was it they who found him? "He's rebound man," Sarah said. "Definitely. It's like, 'Excuse me, are you broken? Let's get intimate.'" "He's the emotional Mayflower," said Maeve. "He gets women from point A to point B. When you arrive at Plymouth Rock feeling enormously better." His ability to emphasize was a strong point. The phase, "he's just like a girl," came up over and over again. "He reads more fashion magazines than most women," said Sapphire, "and he's more willing to fight your battles than he is his own." "He's extremely confident," Maeve continued. "I think it's a mistake when men present themselves as helpless idiots who can't even find their socks," Paris says. "I'm totally secure. Lean on me." And you think, what a relief. Really, it's all that women want. Most men don't understand that. At least Paris is clever enough to affect that. And then there's the sex. "He's awesome in bed," said Sarah. "He's unbelievably great at making out," said Sapphire. "You thought he was awesome?" Jackie asked. "I thought he was awful. Or awful. Can we please talk about his feet?" Nevertheless, so far, Paris seemed to be the embodiment of the two things women always say they want most. A guy who can talk and be understanding like a woman, but who also knows how to be a man in the sack. So what went wrong? Period. Size 8 matters. "It's like this," said Maeve. "As long as you're neurotic and crazy, he's great. But once he solves all your problems, he becomes the problem." "He gets incredibly mean," said one woman. The others nodded. "Once," said Jackie, "when I said I was size 8, Perry said, 'There's no way you're a size 8. You're a size 10 at least. I know what a size 8 looks like, and believe me, you're no size 8. "He was always telling me to lose 15 pounds, said Sarah. "And when I went out with him, that was the thinnest I'd been in years." I think when men tell women to lose weight, it's definitely It's a diversion from their own lack of size in certain areas, one of the women added dryly. Meave remembered a ski trip to Sun Valley. Paris did everything right. He bought the tickets, he booked the condo, it was going to be great. But they started fighting in the limo at the airport. They wanted to sit on the same side. But the time they got on the plane, the stewardess had to separate them. By that time, we were arguing about who got to breathe more air, Meave said. They fought on the slopes. On the second day, Meave began packing her bags. He said, "Ha ha ha, there's a blizzard outside, you can't leave." Meave recalled, I said, "Ha ha ha, I'm going to take a bus." A month later, Meave went back to her husband. Her situation was so not unusual. Many of the women ended up dumping Paris, only to go back to the men they had broken up with. But that didn't mean that Paris went away. There were faxes, letters, and hundreds of phone calls, said Sapphire. It was sort of awful. He does have a huge heart, and he's going to be a great guy someday. I kept all of his letters, Sarah said. They were so touching. You could practically see the streaks of his tears on the pages. She left the room and returned seconds later holding a letter. She read aloud. "You don't owe me your love, but I hope you'll have the courage to step forward and embrace mine. I don't send you flowers because I don't want to share or demean your love with objects not of my creation," Sarah smiled. "We're getting married?" Post-Paris, the women claimed that they had informally done well. Jackie said she was dating her professional trainer. Magna had published her first novel. Ramona was married and pregnant. Meave had opened a cafe. Sapphire had rediscovered an old love. Sarah said she was happy to be pursuing a 27-year-old boy toy. As for Paris, he recently moved abroad in search of fresh marriage prospects. One of the women had heard he got dumped by an English woman who had really wanted to marry a duke. "He always dates the wrong women," Sapphire said. 6 months ago, Paris came back for a visit and took Sarah out to dinner. "He took my hand in his," she said, "and he was saying to his friend, 'She's the only woman I ever loved.' For old time's sake. I went back to his apartment for a drink and he asked me to marry him so seriously. I couldn't believe it. I thought he was lying, so I decided to torture him. He told me, 'I don't want you to see any other man, and I won't see any other woman.' I said, 'Okay,' thinking, 'How's that going to work? He lives in Europe and I live in New York.' But the next morning he called me up and said, 'You realize you're my girlfriend now.' I said, 'Okay, Paris, that's cool.' He went back to Europe, and Sarah said she forgot about the whole thing. One morning, she was in bed with her new boyfriend when the phone rang. It was Paris. While Sarah was talking to him, her boyfriend said, 'Do you want some coffee?' Paris went nuts. 'Who's there?' he said. 'A friend,' Sarah said. 'At 10 in the morning? You're sleeping with another guy? We're getting married and you're sleeping with another guy?' He hung up, but a week later he called back. 'Are you ready?' he asked. 'For what?' Sarah said. 'We're getting married, aren't we? You're not still seeing someone, are you?' 'Listen, Paris, I don't see a ring on my finger,' Sarah said. 'Why don't you send a messenger over to Harry Winston and pick something up? Then we'll talk.' Paris never called Harry Winston, and he didn't call Sarah again for months. She said she sort of missed him. 'I adore him,' she said. 'I feel compassion for him because he's totally fucked up.' It was getting dark outside, but nobody wanted to leave. They all wanted to stay, transfixed by the idea of a man like Tom Paris, but not Tom Paris. That was an interesting chapter. Very fun. Alright, you guys, if you would care to stay tuned to see what chapter 4 is all about, stay tuned here on Charlie's Universe. Holla back.